Hi, and welcome to week 5. We've just finished up week 4, which was modernist poetry, and we are now moving into week 5, which is modernist fiction, predominantly short fiction. We are not reading any longer works. We are reading a collection of short stories, of course. Just to let you know, too, that as of Sunday, the proctored midterm was opened. I know that some of you have went ahead and taken it. It is open book, open note. The only thing you cannot use is, of course, the internet, so it is, in that sense, closed. It is going to be open until the 19th, which is a little over a week from from today. It's a week from the Friday, and it closes at 11:30 p.m. So just to let you know that you will want to be taking that exam. If any of you are questioning or a tidbit concerned about the midterm, you can look under week 6. You will see in the discussion area it says here's a space for you to put your study guides. And just to let you know, I have went ahead and uploaded the study guide. The study guide is something that it's fairly similar to the midterm. I'm sorry. However, it is slightly different. So please feel free to take a look and kind of explore what that's going to look like. If you do have any questions, please, by all means, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to give you some feedback on that. As far as the week goes, what you should be looking for week 5 is you should really be focused on exploring, of course, the modernist fiction of Hemingway and, of course, of Fitzgerald. And we're also going to be doing a little bit of Sherwood Anderson. Sherwood Anderson is a lesser-known writer in many circles, but he is an engaged and very fun read. You will also have a little bit of poetry in this section. Just to remember, the midterm exam, during that week there are no readings, so there is a tendency right now for it to feel a little bit heavy. However, I do think that you will see that there's a little bit of a break coming. And then, of course, we're into the kind of the slow point or the fast point, however you want to look at it, of the semester. As far as the work that you've been doing, I think you guys have done an amazing job. I'm very, very impressed with the level and thoughtfulness that is coming forward in your postings. I can really see a personality that is not usually evident in an online class. You guys are taking this so very seriously, and you're engaging it in such a way that I can't help but think that this is one of those wonderful classes where everyone's just kind of all on the same path. Now, this doesn't mean that all of you are like, I love literature, it is the best, but this means that you are actually thinking and contemplating about how literature functions in our world, culturally speaking, and of course, personally or individually. For instance, Ralph Hornsby mentioned that In a Station in the Metro was a little over his head. Many of you expressed this fear, this frustration of not getting the poetry. And that Ralph, like many of you, did say, like, hey, it was really helpful just to Google it. That you kind of got to see that Ezra Pound did move to Europe. He was not, he really did take poetry seriously. Pound did also have some mental issues, which some of you might have found out. He was actually imprisoned towards the end of his life for treason, because he did agree with the fascists in Italy during World War II. So Pound's an interesting fella. However, his poetry is quite profound. And I think that that's what Hornsby, Ralph was mentioning, is that there really is this sentiment or imagist quality to the poetry of Pound. Tammy took a very holistic approach by suggesting that modernist poetry is a collection of short, compact lyrics that carries a tone of regular speech patterns rather than the cadence of typical rhythmic poetry. That's a good point. It is different, and I think that it's important for you to explore the differences in poetry. We've had quite a few different readings, whether it be from Langston Hughes or whether it be even back further, that you can kind of pull from. Cynthia S. also took a big picture look by saying that modernism is a break from the traditional literary style. Cynthia really focused on the idea of symbolism, which breaks away from traditions and typical literary elements. And Cynthia also really focused on the phrase, make it new, which of course is something that is synonymous with our modern time period. Natalia B. mentioned that poetry, the poem by Marianne Moore, was really kind of trying to explain, even if we hate poetry, some of it, even if we don't understand it, there is a power that we need to appreciate in poetry. And Tony Randall, of course, in his post suggested that Pounds in a station of the Metro could be appreciated because of its expression-filled detail, very vivid, and he even gives a little evocation of Pounds' work by suggesting of the time he spent in D.C. writing on the Metro. Robert mentioned in his very good posting about The Wasteland that it is a masterpiece. The Wasteland really is. Many people have categorized The Wasteland as an encyclopedia of that period, and I like that Robert really did focus on this idea of travel in time and progression and kind of really that power of the work to be almost synergistic, to really kind of capture a period, but also to kind of move us forward and move us back too. So thank you very much for that posting, Robert. Darcella mentioned that Pounds, the river merchant's wife, really did reflect modernism because it focused specifically on the scope of human encounter through time. I think that that's important because that work is often overlooked in many circles, and I think it's an important one, just as important as in the Station of the Metro, but for different reasons. Christopher, I liked his, Claire, he mentioned his Achilles heel is poetry, but that he really did kind of focused on imagery. Excuse me. Imagery is a great word to pick because Pound was very much involved with the Imagist movement, which was also had its inklings or its beginnings in naturalism, which of course Christopher mentioned. I appreciated Christina's reading of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, of putting it as a aftermath of World War I, of trying to explain kind of the overwhelming pessimism of the work. And her posting was amazing in her reading of Eliot because it really did tell us what she believed, and then it showed us through the use of evidence from the poem why we should believe her. And I really appreciated that, Christina. I think you did a fantastic job with your posting. Sharon, I really like the way that you captured modernism. You said that it's a deep thinking movement that, along with traditional trends and changes, arises from a wide-scale and far-reaching transformation in Western society in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Yes, it is very much far-reaching. You also mentioned, Sharon, that modernist poetry started with the appearance of the Imagist. I like that you mentioned that because that is something that keeps popping up. Much like it pops up in Chandraka's reading of the Pounds in the Station of the Metro. She really does a great job of taking it slowly and unfolding that poem, and I really appreciate that slow, methodical read. Michael, the reading of both The River Merchant's Wife, a letter, Selwyn Mobberly, and The Wasteland was you did a good job of capturing those as poetic stories. You really thought about kind of the metaphor of war and how it also is a subtext that this poetry is functioning through and with, and that was a very good point. Lauren, thank you for really taking some time with The River Merchant's Wife. It's an interesting poem, but also often it does have a tendency to be a little too narrative. I like that you do focus on this notion of longing, and that it's an enjoyable sadness in a way, or an enjoyable pining. Franklin, thank you so much for reading You, Sal, and Moberly, even though it's not one of your favorites. I know that you mentioned scornful imagery, this anger that's felt through it, and I think that that is such a good read. Even though you didn't enjoy the work, you really brought out something from that piece that was important to know. Carolyn, thank you so much for your reading of modernism and its attribution of poetry without regulations, and of course with poetry in the modern period, as you mentioned, given the option to expand on themes and controversial concepts and content. Your reading of T.S. Eliot's and Ezra Pound's work is so keenly aware of that tension between tradition and adaptation, or tradition and talent. That kind of juxtaposition is very interesting, and I appreciate you reading it. Jamelia, thank you so much for your observation of modernism, that it's defined as the adherence to or sympathy with what is modern, and that you take that a little bit further by saying the term encompasses a variety of specific artistic and philosophical movements, including symbolism, futurism, surrealism, expressionism, and imagism. And of course, you have the Make It New from Pound, which is so important. Monocle, thank you for your juxtaposition of the short and sweet poetry of Ezra Pound's In a Station of the Metro, juxtaposed against, of course, The River Merchant's Wife, a letter. And I like that you mentioned that you almost felt like you needed to have history, or you needed to have experience of living in London to read some of those poems, because they are so much like the local color stories that we read in the beginning. They capture that time period, that space, that place, both geographical and mental. Brittany also mentioned about Marianne Moore's poetry, that it is really about the differences, calling attention to the differences of poetry, but also calling attention to the fact that this is something that you should enjoy. You might dislike it, but it can be pleasurable. And of course, I'll finish with Deborah's point that modernist literature is characterized by the radical break with the traditions of literary subjects, forms, concepts, and styles. And that it was modernism, of course, operated in the 20th century, and of course through World War I. Most of the modernist period, they bookend it, they usually try to do it like 1860 to 1914. Some will have 1900 to 1945. It really is an oddball period in the sense of trying to bookmark it. I usually try to put it between the Civil War and World War II, because then we will be getting into some postmodern, contemporary pieces of literature and traditions. I think, as I mentioned, you guys did a great job with this. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you deal with Fitzgerald and Anderson and Hemingway, and of course how you're dealing with your midterm. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to assist you with questions or concerns. I appreciate the work that you're doing in this class, and I hope that as you go forward, that the same amount of dialogue and exchange that we've been having in our discussion board stays at this high level, because it really is bringing forward some great ideas and some great observations that are highly helpful and engaged for the study of literature in particular, and of course the study of American literature specifically. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.